Welcome to Cincy Entrepreneurs Unplugged, where EO Cincy members lay it all on the line, sharing real stories of their worst moments and greatest lessons learned. Get ready for an action-packed series featuring a dynamic lineup of EO Cincinnati members.
Without further ado, introducing you to the founder and principal of Prosper Capital and a proud EO Cincinnati member, DJ Hume. DJ, how are you today?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. So DJ, we like to kick off our podcast with a few quick questions to our guests. So I'm just going to fire them at you.
Let's go.
All right. Skyline or Gold Star?
Skyline.
ChatGPT or DeepSeek?
Never even been on DeepSeek, so ChatGPT.
Fair. iPhone or Android?
iPhone. No brainer.
Pizza or barbecue?
Pizza.
CRM of choice?
HubSpot.
Leftover pizza, cold or hot?
Cold.
Love to win or hate to lose?
Depends on the day, but probably hate to lose.
There. That's spoken like a true salesman. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Whoa.
5 seconds or you miss the opportunity. That's the...
I don't know. Albert Einstein?
Albert Einstein. All right. We'll give you to the end of the podcast to potentially change your answer. If you
All
decide.
right. I appreciate that.
Nothing against Einstein. All right, DJ, you passed the test. So to kick us off, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about Prosper Capital?
Yeah. And I'll just add that might be the first test I've ever passed in my life. So,
Right.
So just some quick background. On my business, we are a real estate investment firm based out of Cincinnati, Prosper Capital. We are what we consider a vertically integrated institution. So not only do we raise capital and bring in investors to partner with us in multifamily acquisitions here in Cincinnati, but in the Midwest, but we also manage properties from A to Z. So after we acquire properties, we have a sister company or basically another organization called Prosper Communities. That's our team that manages all of our real estate on a day-to-day basis. That includes property managers, service managers, and other teams that really support the day-to-day operations of all of our properties. And then we also have another team or division called Prosper Construction, where we oversee and manage and do all the project management for any renovations. That includes large CapEx, unit turns, unit renovations, exterior projects, and anything in between. So we really consider ourselves a vertically integrated real estate investment firm, managing a property from the due diligence and prior to the acquisition all the way to the disposition, bringing partners along the way.
Excellent. So vertically integrated, meaning all those things you just mentioned. You've got the construction, the raising the capital, acquisition. The whole thing is in-house.
Yep.
So as you know, I'm an aspiring, I shouldn't say aspiring, also a real estate investor. So we may, with your permission, nerd out a little bit on real estate at some point, and maybe I'll get some free consulting out of this call.
I talk about it every day, all day. So yeah.
And I know you love it. I hear your passion in it when we're together, and I love feeling and seeing that. DJ, what inspired you to start your entrepreneurial journey?
What inspired me? So I think that naturally I probably had that bug to a certain degree. I just didn't know it for a while. But really what was probably the big piece was my first job. I was a medical device sales rep, killing it, making $35,000 a year back in 2015, 2016. Yeah, I know. Like I was just swimming in the cash. But it was a small kind of startup, 8 employees. Didn't have any benefits, really didn't have any freedom. So I started to just kind of see, as I was getting to that, a lot of challenges and problems, and started to bring to my boss, who was the owner at the time, hey, here's challenges that our customers are seeing from our product. And I started to develop solutions and realized that a lot of these things he didn't want to do. So I actually started to become like my own entrepreneur and just naturally kind of solving problems. And that kind of spun into my kind of first startup a couple of years later.
Awesome. And your first startup was Prosper, or is that a different venture?
No, man, I'm an entrepreneur. I've failed many times, So
Well,
my
that's what we
first
want to know
venture.
about. So tell us all about these failures and what you learned along the way.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'll try to be quick on this story, but my first startup was a SaaS solution in the medical world. It
Hmm.
spun from my current job, and it was really a platform, and it was missing in the market. So I went to my boss and said, "Hey, here's an opportunity. Like, here's our solution. We're missing all these things. We should build this." And he said, "I'm not really interested, but if you want to do it, you can." So that kicked off me figuring out at 22, maybe 23, how the hell I start a software company with zero background in that, or raise capital, which had zero background in that too. So
Mhm.
I remember I was Googling, this was before ChatGPT, how to build a business plan. And I copied and pasted a template and started to write down my thoughts and ideas. Um, and so that really kicked off my first startup, which basically over the next 12 months, I started to just after hours from 5 o'clock to 10, PM at night, start to figure out what to do, make problems, start to talk to people. I was cold calling doctors and physicians and all these individuals telling about my idea and starting to shape what this was. But at the same time, software, right? Because my game plan was I was supposed to move to California, raise $30 million, exit in 3 years, have about $100 million in no time.
I
That
like that.
was
That's a
that was
good
the
plan.
game plan.
This was the Google plan.
Yes.
No, that's awesome.
Yes. So 12 months in, I started to started to shape what this was, started to figure out how do I build, like I started to figure out what a wireframe was and build out screens, right? And I'm giving you the short version. This is very painful along the way. It took a lot of time.
And DJ, let
Um,
me just ask you a question because I was, we know each other, but I was creeping your LinkedIn profile before this to kind of refresh my memory on your background. And I
mhm.
noticed something I didn't know about you, which is you have some sort of degree or certification in, is it computer programming or
Development. I
computer?
be I didn't know how to develop a software, so I went to a free computer school to figure out how the hell I develop.
And this was after you had launched the company to develop software, right?
Because I figured I'd need to figure out how to do this.
I love that, and it's such a great example of the entrepreneurial journey. It's like, okay, here's an idea, here's something I believe that I can, turn into reality. How do I get there? And it's
Yep.
like, well,
Yep.
gotta, yeah,
So I
that's
started asking questions. I figured out it's free. I think it's called freecodecamp.com, and figured out how I can go learn. And I started to learn how to develop after hours.
wow.
Um, so yeah, so I, was going down that journey, was figuring out along the way, like wireframing and building out this solution. And I finally got to a spot probably 12 months after I thought of this idea and, uh, and started to call VCs. Right. At that point here in Cincinnati, there wasn't a big market for startups. So calling everyone and, at that point, most people wanted revenue, right? They wanted a concept proven out, not an idea, right? So I'm cold calling VCs. I probably cold called 20 to 30 a day for, I don't even know, months.
And you're 23 or something at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, they laugh at me, right? So, um, so,
But I got a
but
plan.
yeah, but doing that, right? I got comfortable doing the uncomfortable,
Mm,
got really used to know. I was in sales. I didn't like it helped me in many different ways, long term. But I started meeting people I never would have, right? I was putting myself out there. Um, and I remember meeting groups in the Dayton and Cincinnati area that were in the startups and like started to like, they had a name and they started seeing me like show up to these events about startups and things like that. And, you know, you start to build momentum. It takes a long time, but then
mm.
I started to I would pitch and then I would get invited to free boot camps, startup boot camps in Cincinnati and Columbus. And I'd go and spend 3 days and they would teach you how to build a company, right? And what that looks like. So I got all these really amazing experiences about how to start a company coming from this and just really putting myself out there.
Wow.
So awesome experience. Like it was painful, but that is probably the foundation of what helped me become, in my opinion, today, an entrepreneur. I'm going through that and kind of going through that hard knocks and getting free education around it because of all that. I didn't have any money and I didn't pay for any of it. Right.
Mm.
So,
And none of it would have happened if you weren't doing the uncomfortable thing and just putting yourself out there.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly
Like
right.
I make light of I'm 23 and I have my plan, I don't have any revenue and people laughing at you, but that's real, right? Like you got
Yeah,
to deal with that. And because you did it, all of a sudden people are going, who is this guy? Like, yeah, let's
exactly.
invite him in, right? He's doing something, he's going somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where things started to transform, where like my new idea started to have a little bit more life to it. And rather than it being phone calls with VCs where they kind of do this discovery and basically say, we'll call you back, and they never do, um, it started to get a little bit more real. I started to get invited to pitches in front of people. And I remember the first call I got, it was here in Cincinnati, Queen City Angels, and they call you on Sunday and say, you free on Tuesday for a pitch at 10 a.m.? And I'm like, what do I put in a pitch? So I'm like,
Hmm.
of course I say yes. And then I go
Yeah,
figure out
right.
how to build it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like scrambling and it's accelerating this momentum, right? It's something I wouldn't have done without that pushing me.
Mm.
So I started, pitching in person and getting ideas. And I remember, I was basically first year I was figuring out how to run a business or how to build a business plan. Second year I was figuring out how to raise capital. And towards the end of that year, I continued to get feedback and saying, hey, well, we need customers. You need to prove this out. We need a working product, right? Working product was going to cost me $50,000 to get started.
Mhm.
So that was unfeasible. So I went and started to pre-sell the product of wireframes. And I basically had screens that I was pitching as a demo that had enough interaction that looked like it worked, paid like $1,000 for it.
Mhm.
So you got the feel for a working product, but nothing actually worked. It was just screens.
Mhm.
So I had to get creative. So I actually started to sell this product, got a paying customer, and get this is the coolest part. The paying customer was my employer that I was
Really?
working for. So I sold it to them based off of, if you do this, 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 and you can get it to do these things, then we will pay for this product.
Uh-huh.
Now I had a demo, a product I can demo, a not prepaid, but a contractor signed customer. So now I'm cooking with some fire here. So now I'm starting to do this. So I end up actually um, continue to pitch this. I'm getting more momentum. I'm almost 2 years into this thing, maybe 2.5 at this point, still pitching it. And I actually get approached by one of the very first investors that I pitched to, that I got referenced to in Dayton, Ohio. And they are developers and things like that. Um, so he ends up coming back. I'll never forget. We have this meeting. He looks at me. He's like, I can't believe you're still pitching this. That was like, he said, I think I just want to like invest and partner with you just because of the resilience and you just being here. Like this was
Mhm.
literally like 18 months after our first conversation. I went to this guy's office, kind of
Mm.
kicked me out, right? And then I'm back there 18 months later.
Mm.
So, um, long story short, right? They end up in I get an investment, not an investment. They actually sell. I don't know anything about contracts at this point. I sell the IP to this. So I didn't really know it at the time, but I sell the product, I sell the IP. So I'm like, I just want to get a product going. He's right. He's like, I'm going to put in $500,000 in developers and we're going to build out this product. I want to get into the healthcare institution. And I'm like,
Mm.
yes, let's do it. I'm in. We are a team. So I end up selling this IP to him. I didn't know it at the time. I was actually cutting myself out.
Oh man.
And then 6 months later, probably less than that, he quits answering my phone calls and I have nothing to show for it.
Oh
And
man.
that is my first startup.
Wow. What like So this reminds me of a story that I heard from Brian Smith, the founder of UGG Boots. That was one of
Yep.
our EO. I don't know if you attended that.
Yeah, it was there.
And he had, now they were like approaching a billion in revenue or something at the time that he made a similar mistake. And now I don't remember all the details of how that worked, but it's such a it's such a good example of entrepreneurship because when I think of entrepreneurship and what it really is at its core, my own definition is carving your own path. It's
Yep.
like I'm gonna, in whatever that is, doesn't even have to be business. But when it comes to the business world, if we're carving our own path, we are going to find ourselves in uncharted territory.
Yep.
And if we're too afraid to take a risk and just take action and move forward, then we can't get anywhere.
Yep.
So I guess I applaud your courage to just find a way and learn from the mistakes. So I mean, with that experience, what would you say was your biggest learning or takeaway?
Uh, the immediate was get a lawyer.
Good legal advice.
Yeah,
Well,
that was the first one. But like, I mean, there's so many lessons along the way. Like you could look back and be like, man, I could have done this. It could have been something big. Because the reality is there were similar products that 5 years later, right, end up selling for 50 million, 80 million. Like, so I was onto something, right?
mm,
Which like you could look at that lens and be like, well, what if? But like that happened. I got kind of cut out. I was like kind of mad about it, but I'm like, you know what? Whatever. And I just moved on. Like I didn't even think about it after I was
mm,
like decided like, okay, it is what it is. Um,
mm,
but if I wouldn't take anything of that back, because I have 2.5 years of really business experience, entrepreneur experience that cost me little to no money, maybe time and travel and some
mm,
meals along the way. But that 2.5 years accelerated my business acumen, my entrepreneur skill set, all these things. I I consider myself, I got 50 years of experience in those 2.5 years.
mm,
So like I look back and I'm like, I would do that again 10 times over
mm,
because the next thing that I did, whether I'm working for someone or it's my own thing, I am so far ahead of the competition.
mhm. Love it. It what a mindset. I mean, that's what I'm hearing is the ability to fail in where for some people that might just send them into an extended depression or I'm getting out of this entirely. I'm going to choose the safe route. I'm a failure mindset. It was, and I can only imagine there were some tough emotions when that first happened. But I'm hearing a rebound in the ability to look at that failure as a learning opportunity. Um, and beyond that, just like see the virtue in it and not have, I'm not hearing regret. Well, you specifically said you don't regret it and you do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at that age, right, the best thing I can do is learn. All I have is time in my early 20s, right? I got a job. I'm working till 5. I'm free from 5 to 10. I can either go learn about business and get better, or I can go drink and eat pizza, right? So like I got time that, and using my early 20s to sharpen my skill set on the business side was one of the best things I could do.
Mm, I love that. One of one of my biggest challenges as an entrepreneur, one of my biggest learning moments was I platformed our whole business on unproven technology without getting into the details of all the how and all that. It was unproven. I believed in it. I thought we could help, get it to be what it needed to be. And, I sometimes to a fault just have this all-in mindset, which I've had to learn to kind of learn when to lean into it and when to try to have some sort of meta awareness of that and say, okay, is this the place to be all in right now, or is there a way to spread this risk? Um, but I platformed the whole business on this unproven technology, and it did not go well, and cost us dearly in all kinds of ways for about a 2-year period. And when I think back on that and I think about where we are today, I believe we're further ahead today, even in terms of revenue and profits, not to mention the experience that we've gained. Even having had that 2 year period where we burned a lot of resources, and we're committing those resources in places where ultimately they were not driving the bottom line.
Yeah.
But that resonates so much. It was a really tough period for a while when it didn't work out. And I was in my head for quite some time, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made that decision. And just, kind of hanging on to not just the financial investment in it, but I was emotionally invested in the success of this initiative. And when it was not succeeding, that hurt.
Yeah.
But I think that ability to at some point say, okay, hey, I'm here, but it's time to elevate myself back above this line and pull out, what I learned from this and move forward.
Yeah. Exactly right. I learned in some of my startup kind of how to run a business trainings that was part of my first startup is entrepreneurship. The very first thing that they teach you in this course, this was up in Columbus, was show you this big chart, and it's like it's up and then down, up and then down, and then it just keeps going down, right, and then up. And he walks you through. He's like, "This is the life of an entrepreneur." Right. And I never forget that, right? Because it's exactly right. You get these highs, but then you get so many lows, and you get a high and then you get so many lows. And that's just part of it. And I learned, from that, and, making mistakes along the way is, the best thing that I can do as a leader is be very neutral and even keel. Olivia hates that probably. She's like, you never show any emotion, but I tried to keep my highs not too high and my lows not too low, and just keep moving forward towards that end goal.
Now, I mean, I'm hearing that you were able to use that mentality in this experience you just described. Where do you think that came from? Is there anything in your upbringing or life experience where you feel like you built that capacity to, sort of check your highs and also rebound, quickly from the lows, or not let them get you too down?
I think it's a learned skill. I don't think most of us have that. I think back to my hockey and lacrosse days in high school and even in college, right? I would get my highs really high and my lows really low, right? So I think that it doesn't come natural to any of us, and it comes with practice. But probably the best piece is the more times I hear no, especially coming from sales, right? Then you get used to that and you kind of train yourself to when you get that yes. I remember so many times when I was working in a W-2 job, right? You get a yes for a contract, this huge contract, and you're like high fiving and all that stuff, but you never got it signed, right? And then you go way down because they never sign. So I think sales being there was probably the biggest, learning lesson, but it doesn't come natural. You have to practice it.
You and I were talking the other day. I think I had mentioned I was involved in a sale or something, and I hadn't been directly involved in that aspect of the business for quite some time. And there was a moment where I realized I'm a little rusty here. And it's not like sales, like the sort of traditional sales tactics and the close or whatever. But for me, it's just that ability to flow with the situation, really be tuned into what people are saying and find a way to move that deal forward and ultimately close it. And I think back to early in my career, that was what I did for the first 7 to 10 years of my career, was sell. And I was not built for that at the time. It took a lot of just hard knocks and really learning, I think, to use another sort of dimension to my being to be able to sort of lean into that discomfort, get comfortable with the no, put myself out there. But we were talking about, it's something about being in that space, in the sales space, getting rejected, finding a way to close deals. It really does keep you sharp.
Yeah.
It builds a ton of character because it's hard. It's hard to get out there every day and be rejected.
It's very tough.
Hmm.
And a human instinct is we don't want to hear that, right? So you're going against everything that we're like wired for, right?
Hmm.
And it's good, right? It's good to have that and be able to manage that and hear no, right? But it's muscle memory. And if you get away from it, right, you lose that skill. So it's something you got to continue to refine.
And for most entrepreneurs, sales, if we founded something, well then like we had to sell it, right? To get to a
Yeah.
certain point where maybe we moved out of that role. Maybe, there's the saying that like nobody can sell like the CEO. Maybe you're always in that role at some point with the key relationships or something, depending on, your model. Um, but I think about that being one of the big hurdles out of the gate, where I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who have great ideas, and maybe they're great at systems and they're great at a ton of things, but at the end of the day, a deal has to be done, and the willingness to get out there and be rejected repeatedly, oftentimes, and find a way to close the deal and bring the money in the door is necessary to
Oh
take
yeah.
the level, no matter how great the idea is.
I mean, just think back to my first startup, right? 2.5 years, no money, no revenue, no traction. Anyone in their right mind should have quit 5 times before that, probably 10 times. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was crazy enough and stupid enough to just keep going.
Mm-hmm. It's well, so let's move back to that for a moment.
Yeah.
What were you doing for money at that time? Did you have your other job, like your day
Yeah.
job?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I had my day job in medical device sales, right? And then this was something I was doing basically, after hours.
Hmm. Okay, so that was entrepreneurial venture number one. What was number two?
Um, well, let's see. I maybe it was the beginning of what at that point wasn't called Prosper, but my business today.
Hmm.
So as I'm working full time, trying to do this startup, I bought my first house. I think I was 23, maybe. So somewhere along that time frame, I bought my first house actually in Dayton. Um, One, I needed a place to live. My parents wanted me out of the house, so I was kind of getting kicked out. Two was the only thing that was affordable was an $80,000 house in Springboro. Um, and it was a fixer-upper. So kind of got my first practice into buying a deferred maintenance house and going in and fixing it up. So I was going in and basically took me a year to renovate the kitchen, renovate the bathroom, redo the basement, replace the roof, all those things that I had no experience with. I had to, one, I didn't have money to pay for anything, right? Again, I'm making 35,000. I can barely put food on the table.
Right.
Um, so basically I have enough for materials and then I have to go and do it myself, or I hire my dad with some pizza, and
Hmm.
have him show me. So that was another kind of hard knocks lesson about the real estate side. And that was really the beginning of my business today.
Mm. So you mentioned your dad, and kind of joked about hiring him with pizza, but it sounds like he was a supportive force during that process.
Yeah, I mean, definitely on the, it's funny. So I go to buy the house, right? My parents, everyone's like, yes, buy it, buy it, buy it, right? Everyone's motivated. And I wasn't so excited. So I kind of got pushed to buy this, right? And then it was a fixer-upper. So kind of getting pushed to fix it. So, my dad was a big support of that and helping do that, right? He spent countless hours and even probably help buy some materials along the way if I didn't have the money. So it was huge, right? To get that done. And I remember even bringing, my brother-in-law came up for a weekend to come. All he did was work all weekend with me. Like we worked till 2 in the morning. So
Hmm.
there was so much support to get all that done. So it was a huge driving force. So fast forward, everything's done. I'm living there, right? And I was like, hey, you know what? I should rent this thing, you know? And then everyone's like, where are you gonna live? I'm like, oh, I'll figure that out later, but I should rent this. And I'll never forget. I had all this support to buy the house, to fix the house. The second I wanted to rent it, it was like the claws came out. Meaning like I remember my boss, people that I work with were like, "You are an idiot. Why would you rent it? They're gonna ruin the house, all that stuff." Told my
Mhm.
parents, they're like, "You're so dumb. Why would you do that?" Like everyone was like, "You are an idiot," right? Across the board. And I was like, you know what? Like they don't know what they're talking about. So I just went ahead and did it. And I remember everyone was against me. No one supported me. Which I thought was funny, right? Everyone's supporting you to buy a house, but then when you go to like make money off of it, I got very little to no support along the way. So I had to go against the grain.
Hmm. Yeah, such another great entrepreneurial lesson is going against the grain. And, it's like you hear it over and over again from people who have started businesses where, at least what they say, and I think there's a large degree of truth to this, is most people or everyone tells them, don't do it, it's a bad idea. And, you know, I think about that a lot. It's like I think that's actually coming from a place of love and care from the people that we love and know, because they don't want us to take risks, because it's one of the hardest things to do is watch someone you love and care about take a risk that could go wrong. So it's like, no, stay the safe course.
Yeah.
But you had that drive, and I think, all entrepreneurs to an extent have that, where it's like, no, I believe in this path. I recognize there's risk, and I'm gonna proceed.
Yeah. I probably wasn't that smart to recognize that piece of it. I was just like, you know what, I'm doing it.
Well, then there's the other thing, which is the necessary lie. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, this won't be that hard, or like this will work. Well, we have
Yeah.
to believe at least one of those two things, right?
Yeah. Exactly right.
To be able to take the leap.
Exactly right.
Could so you started with one home. I think maybe the real estate investor term for that is that house hacking?
But
I don't
yeah,
know.
it was not a term at the time, but yes, house hacking.
So you're the OG house hacker. Before house hacking was a thing, DJ was
Yeah.
house hacking. Um, So where did you live? You rented it. Where'd you go?
So I think I went home. I'm a little foggy on the exact details, but I
Mhm.
think I went home for a couple weeks. But I remember I like got it rented and I had a runway. So I was like, great, I got it rented. I'm gonna go buy another house.
Yeah.
So I like got one taken care of, and then I was working my way backwards. I was like, all right, I got 90 days to go find a house. So I went and did it.
Hmm.
Bought my second house in Cincinnati.
Hmm.
This one was the opposite of a house hack, right? I realized in that first piece, one, I hate construction. Two, I'm terrible at it. And I don't have the patience for it.
Hmm.
So I went and bought a fully renovated house in Cincinnati. So what I did there was got it under contract, and then I got this first house rented. I'm back home. I want to move more down towards Cincinnati. Got this house under contract, kind of start going through the process. And I remember like 30 days before, he's like, you know what? Maybe I'll just try to rent this too. Kind of like this. So I actually rented the property before I even closed on the house and had renters in there on the
Wow.
second day of owning the property. So went from essentially no rentals to two rentals in, very short amount of time.
Hmm.
Um, so then I was like, okay, well, now I need somewhere to live. So then I went and found a third house and went and bought like a condo to go live there.
Okay. And then you actually did live in the condo.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So
So tell me more about that real estate journey. Like you bought
yeah.
one, got the next one, now you're living in a condo. Like, how did you go from one, two houses to vertically integrated property management, development, all the
Yep.
things?
Yep. So I was able from when I started in the real estate side in 2015 or so, through about 2018. I went from a couple houses. I think I got up to like six houses, was all said and done. So I basically kept buying a house every 6 months or 3 months or 8 months, and constantly like getting them rented right after that. My last one was this big flip where I bought, a house for like $20,000, needed to be gutted. And I had 50,000 in my bank account, and the project budget to get it done was 45,000. So I'm like, yep, let's do it. And that was my first lesson into kind of the hard knocks of the construction side.
Mm.
Um, I had a small budget, in a very short time frame to get this done. Granted, I'm still working full time, by the way. I brought in my first contractor, have no experience doing all this, got a deal signed up, right? He's ready to go. We close on that. Gave him 5,000 cash the next day. Never heard from him since. So my first lesson in that was getting ripped off. Like any good project, especially as a newbie, project went over budget, over time, and I had to probably go through 4 or 5 GCs along the way. But I got so many great lessons again of like how to manage contractors. Had to mostly learn how what to do, and kind of learned a lot of those lessons the hard way. And from there, right, I ended up getting that project done, right? I was basically using my income from my W-2 and like getting my check for $2,000 putting into this. So ultimately made it work. So come out of that, 5, 6 houses that are rentals. Outside looking in, most people, I'm 25, 26 at this point. Most people are looking at me and like, man, DJ's crushing it. Got all these houses, rentals, right?
Yeah,
The reality is
you got a house, you got all these rentals, like, yeah,
killing it, right?
he's killing it.
But behind the curtain, right? Single families tend to not make that much money in a cash flow standpoint. You're making a couple $100. So, the last piece that I said I need to change something is had one of my rentals that brand new house, the HVAC went out and had to be replaced. The whole system cost me $6,000. It was supposed to be a brand new system. So it was just something I missed or whatever it was. But that one fix that I needed, 6,000, basically wiped out not only that property's cash flow, but all my property's cash flow for the entire year. And I was like, there's got to be a different way. So,
Right.
I started to look at.
You had debt on these properties, presumably.
Yep. Debt on that. Yep, exactly. So I was like, you know what, there's got to be a different way. So I started to look into real estate, and look at different avenues, started to learn about all the different channels, right? And industrial, self-storage, right? Multifamily, commercial, like you name it, I looked at, but I really started to land on the multifamily space and really started to resonate with that. And looked into it and started to study it very hard for, I would say 12 or 14 months, like learning everything I could about it. And all self-taught to a certain degree, listen to podcasts, reading up online. Like I remember probably unsafe, but I would listen to podcasts because I'm still in my sales job. So I drive a lot and I'm like learning about cap rates and financials while I'm driving with my cell phone and the calculator up. Like, how do I do this again? Right. So I'm just using every ounce of time, of free time that I have to educate myself. And I did that for, 12, 14 months before I was able to truly make my first acquisition into the multifamily side of the business.
So you started with the house hack, then you did a couple more single families, recognized this single family rental model is not a great cash flow model. So I'm gonna lever up, or I'm gonna 10x, whatever. I'm gonna take things to the next level. And you looked at all these different ways of investing in real estate, whether it's self-storage, commercial, whatever, multifamily. How, there are so many real estate investors out there that either they're aspiring and they never even get to that first rental, or they get to that first rental, maybe they do a couple and they have that same aha moment that you did, but they struggle to make that leap to invest in whatever for them is that next level type of investment. Can you just sort of walk us through your thinking as you were looking at these different avenues, whether it be commercial, self-storage, whatever it was, and how you landed on multifamily?
So on that side, it resonated. First, I looked at what do I want my life to look like in 5 years or 10 years, right? So it wasn't today, but it was where do I want to be and what do I believe in, right? So, and then naturally, I just found that multifamily, I came from a SaaS world and medical device, which is a really complicated and, difficult business. And I found that multifamily when I really broke it down and learned it, was so simple. It was a P&L statement. It was income, expenses, and that's your like it was such an easy business that I
Mm.
was like, this is a no-brainer, right? It's
Such a
uncomplicated.
simple business,
Yeah,
right?
simple. Yes.
Not necessarily.
Yeah. I thought it was easy, right, at the beginning, but it was simple, right? It was basic financials and it resonated both with what I want to do, where I want to be, and the lifestyle that I want to create. And I
Mhm.
got it, right? And it made sense to me. So it just clicked. So that was kind of my thinking. Whereas the other stuff, right? These triple net leases, these billbacks, these cams, like all these other, um, one, it seemed unattainable for me, but it like was just wasn't as simple to me personally and didn't resonate with what I wanted to do.
Love it. And I love what you said about, well, A, keeping it simple. Um, and when you mentioned SaaS and all that, I thought you were going to go with the residual revenue thought process, but I presume that's all real estate investments,
Yeah.
theoretically. Uh, but it's thinking about, you didn't say the business that I want, you said about the life that I want, and then backing into your next steps based on looking forward to the life that you are building. Is that something that you learned somewhere, or like did you get that in one of these boot camps that you were going through when you were trying to start your SaaS company, or how did you arrive on that way of thinking?
No, I think that probably just a lot of my experiences, even working with your, pitches and investors and really like well off and established individuals, right? Going back to my first startup, like met a lot of really connected and connected people that are really wealthy and do really well off. Um, and I remember I would see them, or even back in my college days, the entrepreneurs and these people were the same people that got to be at all their kids' sporting events,
Mm,
right? And they kind of, I felt, lived like a worry-free life. Like I remember they would spend money and on stupid stuff for their kids. And I come from, blue collar, not poor, but like, money is something we budget for every week or two, right? So I think um seeing how I grew up, right, and how we had to account for every dollar, and then seeing the other side of the coin of some of
mm,
these individuals that really get to do whatever they want and kind of be where they want to be whenever they want to be. Like that was my thinking, kind of back of the head is how do I get that freedom?
mm. And I love, again, I'm going to beat the mindset word to death in this podcast, but you're hitting all the points. I love that's such an above the line way of thinking. When, oh, I see these people in this life that they have, how did they get there? Like, I want to learn about, I want to do that. I can, not only do I want to, I believe I can, and I'm gonna figure out how to get there versus, sort of a more a below the line approach, which doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah.
But that can turn into, sort of almost like a victim mindset where it's like, oh, look at everything they have. I didn't have the same opportunities, whatever it is. It's like, no, well, I like that. Let's paint that picture and then back into how I get there.
Yep. Yeah. And it's probably my biggest asset, but also like a negative for me is like, if I put my mind to something, I'm going to do it. Right.
Hmm.
So not always the best thing, but in the entrepreneur world, and especially when you come to that vision and where I want to be, right?
Mm.
Something I wake up and think about and make my actions directly towards that.
Hmm. So talk to me. You said that it can be a negative. In what way?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably similar to like what you had. Sometimes, at least at the beginning, if you don't check it, like your ego can get in the way, especially when you're
Mm.
beginning. You had your
Hmm.
software platform. I'm sure your ego's kind of getting in the way, like, hey, I can't fail, right?
Right.
Um, and it's so you have to learn how to manage that and
Mm.
be like embrace the fail
Hmm.
and be able to not only embrace it, but then most likely you have friends, family, maybe employees, right? And tell them, hey, I failed. Like I really fucked this up.
Hmm.
But here's what we're going to do next.
Hmm.
So that's a skill again, especially once I got employees that I had to learn like and embrace that and let our team members also embrace that.
Mm. yeah, and that such power and vulnerability to be able to stand in front of your team and say, like, hey, like I fucked this up, guys. That was a bad decision, or we didn't do this well, whatever. But what are we going to do? Or here's where we're going. What's the next step?
Yep.
And I think we can build so much as leaders, so much trust when we're willing to be genuine and vulnerable with our teams.
Yep.
I think that's something that I know my EO forum experience, which really pushes us into, we call the 5% of, the things that we can't share with anyone else. But here you have this group of other entrepreneurs, and here's where we can talk about anything. And that takes a willingness to step up and be able to share those things. And I saw that I'll call it practice of vulnerability sort of permeated into the rest of my life and really began to elevate everything.
Yeah, exactly right.
You talked about that ability to vision, and if you set your mind to something that you're going to get it, or you're going to do everything you can to get there, and that most entrepreneurs have some version of that happening, and that's part of what allows us to take those risks and move forward. How did joining EO, trying to figure out how to ask this question without answering it the way that is already in my head, but tell me about that mindset, that belief system, and then joining a community of entrepreneurs and what that felt like, what that experience was.
So, one, I remember you were really the reason I joined EO. You were becoming, I think you were getting our first property to insure. I remember we hung out in your office and we just had like a really personable conversation. I think we hung out in your office for like 3 hours just talking about life and things like that. We were just bullshitting.
Coffee, talking real estate and life. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't coffee. It was a bunch of beers, but
Yeah, you're right. It was beers. It was an afternoon meeting. Probably. Yeah.
But we were talking about it, and there were a lot of challenges I was facing as an entrepreneur that I didn't have many people to turn to, if any, especially coming from where I came from. My dad was a manager for Ryan Homes. My mom was a nurse. Like my entire family were like teachers and things like that. I didn't know really any entrepreneurs that I could call on. So I ended up facing a lot of challenges, and in entrepreneurship in general, you feel relatively alone and isolated. That's just kind of a natural piece. And that's where you and I kind of had this conversation. We're like, yeah, man, like you're insurance, but we both have that same problem. What did you do? What I do, right? So that was a really meaningful conversation when you're like, hey, you should join this. There's more people like me, right? So that was what inspired me to start to look at that and come to events and see if it was a good fit. So I met a lot of really cool people, and we would talk about, or we'd have a genuine conversation about a business problem. Hey, I got this invoice problem. What's going on? Like, you probably don't know, I'm in real estate. You'd be like, oh yeah, I face the same thing, right? So we just naturally gravitate, because it doesn't matter the industry, the challenges, from a macro standpoint are relatively the same. And maybe they can't get you the exact pinpoint answer, but man, they can get you really pointed in the right direction. And if they can't give you the answer, they can probably connect you with someone who might be able to get you closer to that answer. So that was what was really cool, was kind of being able to meet individuals that had those similar experiences. And selfishly, I was 28, maybe 29 when I joined. I was like, you know what? And I remember going to the same group. I'm like, man, bunch of old people here. I bet you they got problems that they can help me solve. I'm like,
right?
Let me learn from their experiences, and I'm learning on their dollar, because they probably made the expensive issue. I'm like, this is what I want. Like, and so that was really what inspired me, not only these conversations, but I was like, the cheapest solution I have is to learn from someone else, not make my own mistake.
Again, mindset. I love the way you think about all of that. But what hit me there was that even when it comes down to dollars and cents, like beyond all of the sort of intangible benefits we get from having a community of like-minded, forward-thinking people that are committed to personal and professional development and each other and all those amazing things. From a dollars and cents perspective, the most economical way to progress is to join something like EO where you can learn from other people's mistakes before you make them yourself. Right?
It's the
That's really
cheapest solution.
the
Exactly.
cheapest solution.
Yep.
Spoken like a true real estate investor, DJ. I love it.
I am a penny pincher.
Well, that's how properties make money, right? So your investors should appreciate that about you. When did you know that like Prosper had arrived or was going to make it? Like, was there a moment where you're like, all right, like yes, I'm, knowing you, there's always more growth ahead, but like we've done it.
Yeah.
Like this is a thing.
So I don't think I ever got to a point where I'm like, yep, that's it. My business has always been these gradual steps. And what we didn't get to was after I got into my first property of multifamily, right? Fast forward, I then bought like one 6 months later, and I kind of did the same thing. So like 18 months later, I ended up buying like 4 or 5 multifamilies. And I remember waking up one day where I probably have like 50 units or 60 units or something like that. Granted, I'm managing everything myself. I'm using my personal cell phone, like my Gmail, like all that stuff. And I remember waking up to him like, damn, I think I have a business right here. I need to start acting like it. And that has been like the evolution of the company and what we do today. Like we end up just start like doing something. And then I'm like, oh, shoot, we're a property management company. Okay, make an LLC, figure that out. Let's get an email. Like, let's do that. But I built the business and then started like create the infrastructure around it first. Like I was getting the momentum, build the infrastructure, get some momentum, build some infrastructure. And I've done that across the board. Same thing with our construction side, right? I started personally GCing stuff and I'm like, oh shit, we keep doing all these construction. I need to like build a process around this, build a company around it, figure out a project manager, right? And every evolution has been that way. So I do that because what I found in my early part of my career when it came to entrepreneurship, especially my first startup, I remember spending weeks, if not months, about the name of the company, the logo, like all this stuff that doesn't even matter. Right. And so I don't do that anymore. I literally say, oh, it's an idea. Okay, let's go see if there's some traction to it. Let's see if we can do it. And then if it does, great, we'll make the LLC, we'll do all that stuff later. But let's not spend our time and effort on something that is irrelevant and isn't going to drive revenue.
Love that. Well, you may have just answered my final question, but I'll ask it and you can pick that or pick another one. But what one thing would you tell entrepreneurs starting out, or what one thing would you tell your younger self?
There's a lot of different things. But I would say what we haven't touched on is in general, I think that entrepreneurship starts with this kind of like feeling. And I remember mine was like this feeling in my gut, right? And there's kind of two people on your shoulders, right? Oh, do it. But then there's a stronger feeling of like, too risky, don't do it. And every time I follow my intuition, my gut, and I do it, and I believe in myself, right? It's rocky. I fail, right? But I end up failing forward and it ends up to be something great. Might not even be what I originally intended to, but it takes me to that next step. So as a new entrepreneur or someone that's thinking about doing it, right, there's always going to be why you should do it, why you shouldn't do it. If you believe like deep down in your gut and you're feeling like, yes, I should do it, worst case is you fail and you still learn. Best case, it actually comes and turns into something that's meaningful and can make an impact on others.
Love it. Love it, DJ. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I feel like there's so much more that we could unpack, so we might have to have a sneaky V2 of this session. Maybe we'll do it when I'm back in my office over a few beers at 5 o'clock, so we can
There you
make it
go.
happen in person.
Love it.
But thank you, DJ, for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for having me.